can't see it, you can't touch it, you can't smell it, you can't hear it.
People are obviously fearful of a new technology. The mobile phone frequencies are not that different from things that we're all used to in terms of radio and television.
Electricity as we know it today. It will probably have many new uses.
The boom in electronic equipment has moved from inside the home to outside the home.
The pattern of life may not alter, but one thing is absolutely certain. There will be a greater demand for everything electrical.
Electronic devices don't always need a wire and socket to make them respond. The information gets sent in radio waves through the atmosphere and us. The regular wireless pulse from phones, computers and satellites is constantly passing through our bodies, like strands making an invisible web. This is electrosmog. But what effect is this constant barrage of low-level radiation waves having, and what is the government doing about it? Some say this electrosmog is interfering with their bodies and changing their lives.
I'm in the golf business, put together sponsorship and funding for media projects in the golf industry. I had a very comfortable lifestyle. I was always flying somewhere and travelling and visiting beautiful golf courses around the world. So it was just a very privileged existence.
Welcome to Bangkok.
Not even burning the candle at both ends. I was very fit. I used to go to the gym a lot. It was a beautiful life, beautiful. I'd been dizzy and numb for a year or two. I stopped eating and weight was falling off. I was losing my ability to remember anything. I mean, I was writing myself notes all the time and forgetting I'd written notes. So it was like I was having a memory whiteout. It was like wading through treacle the whole time because I just couldn't function. My right side was all numb, tingling, buzzing. I had numbness here, here. My hip was the biggest area, my knee, and then underneath my right heel. My heart was always beating far too fast. Then it started upsetting my hormones once it got really involved. Thyroid underactivity, so I was always tired and run down and didn't feel I could actually accomplish anything. My intellectual capacity was so diminished. It was hard to read the paper. There were some days I couldn't even open the paper because just the exhaustion of reading the paper was too much.
This ex-government scientist who doesn't want to be identified says his work with radar has left him so sensitive he knows immediately when a new mast is turned on. For him, the symptoms are all too visible.
You feel like tearing the skin off your arms and hands. And it starts here on the ball of the thumb, spreads to the palm, then it works its way right up the arm. You can see the outbreaks here. But in fact, the blood supply has been restricted to the toes. I've got no feeling in my toes, by the way.
On the advice of a Health Protection Agency report, the Department of Health recognises that people are ill, but not what's causing the illness. But some electronics engineers are convinced.
In recent years, we've become really surrounded by a sea of electromagnetic signals that simply weren't there 20 years ago. And we call that electrosmog because if you could see it, it would be like a thick, gooey fog. The biggest causes, I suppose, are our increasing use of wireless devices, from cordless phones to mobile phones to wireless LANs to everything is going radio at the moment, and that's really putting up the levels, our background levels of radio frequency radiation. The build-up of microwave radiation is having a cumulative effect. So, for example, 20 years ago when
mobile phones were invented, there were very few about. All of a sudden, everybody's on a mobile phone all the time. There's a connection from the mobile phone to the nearest transmitter, and that's an electrical connection. So there need to be more mass. Then, of course, there's the wireless computer networks now that are relatively stable and relatively cheap to put in, so everybody's going wireless, including the schools for the kids.
If we put a digital cordless phone, DECT phone unit on, you'll see that it actually changes very significantly. Both in here, where we've got all these frequency components, and here in the amplitude, you see this enormous amount of pulsing. And that's what the electrosmog detector picks up. It tells you whether you're being surrounded by things like that, these spiky signals, or whether you've just got background radiation from the universe, which we don't believe is problematic.
Could electrosmog be changing the way our body communicates with itself?
Inside the human brain.
So far, the official studies have been clear.
The scientific studies can't actually demonstrate a link between the symptoms being triggered and exposure to any type of electromagnetic field. The symptoms that they get are ones that are common in society, and we just don't know what the cause of those symptoms might be at the moment. It's probably a bit more about eliminating causes, and you've still got a lot left that it could be.
The International Commission on Non-Ionising Radiation Protection, or ICNIRP, set up guidelines with the European Union on safe levels of emissions, but campaigners claim they aren't measuring the right things.
The tests were based upon whether the emissions from the mobile phones, mass or mobile phones themselves, actually cooked your brain or heated you. But it's not that side of the transmission that is giving the problems, it's the actual interference with the body's biochemistry and electrical activity within the body, not cooking of the brain. We accept that mobile phone, telephone mass aren't going to cook you.
Why don't we test the microwave on the electrosmog detector? This hasn't been on for 15 months. Right, so let's do 900. Right, okay, 1 minute. That's very intensive. Now you'll need to convert what 900 means. And quite frankly, I'm going to stop it now. Have you got enough?
Okay, that's fine.
I really don't want to be...
No.
But that's how noisy it is.
Yeah.
That's a normal microwave. I was standing here. I don't know how that equates to a dose. But you really wouldn't want that intensity flowing through into your body.
How do you feel now?
Yeah, I'm getting a slightly dizzy on the right. It's always on my right side. It's sort of like I'm slightly disoriented at the moment.
The ICNIRP guidelines and our guidelines take account of a very thorough review of the science about all the health effects. The microwave radiation that's used in mobile phones is very, very similar to TV and radio broadcasts. We have been living with that in our environment for most of our lifetimes. It's not that new.
Having worked in the telecommunications industry, Glyn Hughes saw and took part in the race for wireless. But he also saw the effect the waves were having on his daughter and gave up when she became ill. As a radiation consultant, he took me out to measure a mast. It came out at just over 1% of the UK guidelines on acceptable emissions. But other countries have rejected these guidelines, such as Austria, where this mast's emissions would have been double the acceptable amount. Elsewhere in Europe, Sweden recognises and treats the almost 300,000 registered electrosensitive people. But without the government here recognising what causes the illness, doctors are unable to diagnose it. For Sarah, several doctors and numerous tests brought no conclusive results and led her to start her own research. She eventually recognised her symptoms on the electrosensitivity.org website and finally put a name to her illness.
Usually called electrical sensitivity, properly electromagnetic sensitivity. So it's shortened to ES, sometimes hypersensitivity, more serious cases. And the people who come to me have usually been puzzling and quite distraught, emotional. They can't understand what's wrong with them, why they feel so wretched and ill.
I was able to identify that it was my burglar alarm, runs on microwave sensor pads in 3 key rooms. I do 2 decked phone base stations and a mobile phone switched on all the time. I'm living backing on a golf course. There are masts all the way along the main road, which is only 1 kilometre away over here. So the back of the house picks up a fairly hefty signal. And it's worse when there are no trees. So I was finding out that I was ill in May. So it was quite a dilute set of signals, but I was still picking them up. All the signals that came in were bouncing off the signals in the house and being amplified. So I was just bathed in microwaves since I'd moved in, and that's why I got so sick so quickly.
But it's not just the health effects that are crippling.
I haven't earned for 15 months now, which means I'm not paying a mortgage, or I'm having to run up an overdraft. It's very unfortunate, but I've had to put the financial considerations to one side and just say, okay, health is most important, and do the best I can.
Would you be able to put a figure on how much you've actually spent on trying to get better?
Probably about 25,000 actually. I've been here, there and everywhere. I've had about 8, 10 different treatments. I've bought products. Right, I used to sit there with my bare feet on the tin foil, and this would be grounded into the earth on the plug socket. So I'd sit here and type, and then I would be grounding all the time. And when I was very vulnerable, that was quite useful.
The only thing I think people can do is screen themselves, reduce the radiation. And we do know that that works.
I have screening, I have some extra fabric, as you can see here. And when it used to get really, really bad in winter, sometimes what I do is I pin an extra bit on here, if this is the right way round, and then I pin it up here, and then I sleep under that. That's on a really really bad night when, for some reason, there are more signals than other nights, and you can never predict.
What does it feel like to actually sleep under?
Oh, it's annoying, but so is being awake all night. So you asked me about some of my.
With little help from traditional doctors, Sarah's tried many forms of alternative medicine.
They call them Chinese teas, and in this, I just get you a spoon. There's a mixture of seeds, barks, flowers, flower heads, and different amounts of plant material. And this.
What does it taste like? Because it looks disgusting.
It probably tastes, until you get used to it, the worst thing you can ever think of. It's a bit like drinking the taste of silage or a manure heap. I feel a lot better on them. And when I have a week or 3 weeks off, I can tell that I haven't had them for a while.
The advice from the Health Protection Agency is rather more traditional.
If you've got a headache, maybe taking some tablets to treat the symptoms is the best pragmatic way we can offer help at the moment.
Did you actually ever think that you might die?
Yeah, oh yeah. I've changed my will. I got a new guardian system in for my son. Yes, I thought I was going to die. I really thought I've reached a point in my life and I might not come back from this point.
At Electrosensitivity UK, Rod Reed is hearing from an increasing number of desperate people.
These are my files of personal cases that people have sent in letters, statements, typed statements, handwritten, and these are all people who are ill and know it and know exactly what causes it, and they don't have any further doubt about it.
There's already been scientific studies in this field, such as the one at King's College London, under Professor Simon Wesley and Dr. James Rubin.
What we did was a study to look at whether mobile phone signals have any side effects, essentially, whether they cause any short-term symptoms. And by that I mean things like headaches, nausea, fatigue, dizziness, that kind of stuff. Okay, well this is the room we did all the testing in. We asked our participants to sit in this chair here, and what we did was attach one of these to their heads. What this does is emits one of three things. It either emits a normal digital GSM mobile phone signal, or a signal that's very like that, but it doesn't have the same kind of pulsing quality, or it emits no active signal at all. It's the control session. Our volunteers obviously didn't know which session was which, and in fact the researchers doing the testing didn't know which session was which either, so it was all nice and double-blind. And what we saw was that people did indeed report negative sensations during the experiment. People did report headaches, and they did report fatigue, and particularly in the sensitive group. And for some of our sensitive volunteers, the symptoms were so severe that we had to halt the study early for some of them. But crucially, there was no difference between the conditions in terms of how often symptoms were reported. So people were reporting these negative sensations just as much in the sessions where there was no active signal as in the ones where there was. In other words, there was no evidence that it was the mobile phone signal that was to blame for these problems.
But campaigners are unhappy that their tests have had the same results as those of Gulf War syndrome, multiple chemical sensitivity and chronic fatigue syndrome, all of which Professor Wesley has overseen research into. I asked him how he responded to any criticism.
It's not a subject that I care about. I care that we got the study right, and that we got the science right, and that we did it properly, which we did. If there had been an effect, we would have found it, and we would have published it in exactly the same way. So, as I say, I don't mind about this thing. What I care about, my job is to do the study properly and to make sure it is done properly, and I'm confident that we did that.
So if there's no scientific proof that electrosmog is causing people to get ill, what could it be?
What I suspect is happening is that it's the result of what we call a nocebo effect. If we give you something and you're convinced it's going to do you harm, then that belief can, in some circumstances, become a self-fulfilling prophecy. So you think it's going to do you harm. When you're exposed to that thing, you start monitoring yourself very closely for any signs of ill health, and you also become more anxious. And those two things in combination, the anxiety and the expectation that something's going to happen to you, can then in turn trigger those physical symptoms. So it may be that there's something psychological going on that's triggering these problems.
The health service, in my opinion, in my humble opinion, is a lot of the problems that it's suffering is due to this.
At one point the medics were suggesting, there might be drastic action, and I said, no, it's okay, I'll sort it out. It's because the microwaves are affecting the immune system directly. They're specifically affecting the cardiovascular system in this case, which means not enough blood is going down to the feet.
After getting $22.5 billion for 3G licenses, the government only allocated $7.5 million for research into mobile technology, with half of that coming from the industry itself. This move has led to some criticism.
The government, we don't think, is a neutral player on this issue. It's had an absolutely fantastically large, unexpected amount of money from the auction of the licenses, $23 billion in one round of licensing, and it's been estimated to be getting $15 billion a year in tax. And so unless there's a very black and white causal link established, it is not in the government's interest to, what should we say, to get in the way of this bounteous technology.
Obviously they have a duty to fund any health and safety research about their products, but the money is run independently by the Department of Health and the National Radiological Protection Board. So, and they have the industry has no input whatsoever into that process. They have a duty to fund things like this. It's a product safety issue, but for reasons of trust, I think, in this world, they have no involvement whatsoever in the research. I've never met anyone who works for a mobile phone company, except when they try and sell me them, of course.
Whilst mobile phone companies are encouraging us to talk more, they don't seem too keen themselves. I invited the Mobile Operators Association, which represents the 5 main operators, to take part in this documentary, but they declined. They did, however, give me a statement referring to the latest World Health Organization fact sheet, which says, "There is no convincing scientific evidence that the weak radio frequency signals from base stations and wireless networks cause adverse health effects." So what does the future hold?
We hope it won't take as long as asbestos, tobacco, lead in petrol, but some kind of regulatory regime and limits will have to be instituted. It's not for me to say what they are.